Welcome to the Green Room. This is the show that is not enforcing a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. However, for other podcasts that are enforcing a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, you have my full respect. And as always, I am your splendid host, Terry Cook. And today I am wearing my Taylor Swift t-shirt because I have a feeling that I may be the problem on this episode. But as always, I am delighted to be here and even more delighted that you have chosen to listen. And you will be delighted that it's not just me. I am joined by, let's see if I get this right, the co-founder of the DITC and the founder of the TTE, Chris Bensted. How are we doing, Chris?
I'm good. We love a set of letters, don't we?
I've no idea what they mean. Something to do with theory and driving, I think.
I'm just trying to get a good score in Scrabble, and then I'll be happy.
Well, you want to get a zebra crossing in there somewhere because that's not bad, is it? And questions. There you go. There's two letters you can get him. But it's not just me and Chris. We are also joined by some of my lovely premium members who, at the minute, are lurking around in the background, and we'll bring them in later on if they want to share their views, and we'll go from there. But we are back with episode 33, as I mentioned, and we've got a lot of news to cover today because we didn't cover it in the last episode for a very specific reason. And just before I dive into that, so I'll just mention one other thing first, which is, as I said, a lot of news to get through in a moment. But last month we did that very specific episode because we the industry lost a legend in Lou Walsh, and I know, Chris, you wanted to mention something specific about this, but I just wanted to jump in beforehand and just say sort of a thank you first of all, because after that episode I got a lot of lovely comments, a lot of lovely feedback from people, and anyone that spoke to me beforehand or anyone that saw it live will know that I was having big debates whether to do it or not, and whether it would be exploitative or anything like that, when I just wanted to do something nice. So, thank you for the feedback. It was much appreciated because it wasn't not the best of things, if that makes sense. I still don't know how to talk about it now, but we do as we can. So Chris, what are your thoughts? 'Cause I know you had a few bits you wanted to share about that.
Well, firstly, wasn't the feedback lovely? I had some people getting in touch and saying, it genuinely helped them through things to kind of process, and I don't think we could have had better feedback, including from Lou's family, which was really appreciated because we were both a little bit unsure. I know Phil felt the same. It was raw, and I think it was quite cathartic as well. Any event in my life now, I'm going to be saying, can we do a podcast to chat about it? Because it definitely helped us work through things, and I think it helped a lot of other people. We had the funeral, which was an, I don't know if it's right to say an event. It was a touching tribute. There we go. Not many people get Birdie to sing live at their funeral. Lou had taught Birdie to sing, so she came along with her full name, and I can't remember what it was now. And just everything was absolutely appropriately a touch of Lou. And I thought it was really nice. So it was good to meet up with faces that all were sharing their own recollections, and it was what it needed to be, I think. But I think we're all still figuring out what that means, and I keep hearing from people that are saying that as well. On a hopefully positive, but I don't think there's going to be a dry eye in the house. Note, we have decided to go ahead with the choir, the Big Learner Relay choir recording for this year, which was already planned. We hadn't found a date. We literally were just about to kind of tie things down. The song hasn't changed. It's just got a new meaning, which I think is lovely. I don't know. Well, ask me afterwards. But we've got a good number of people. Hopefully, a number of Louise's family are going to be coming along as well. I'm not quite sure how that day goes, but we're organising some food for afterwards so that everyone can have a chat and a catch up. And it was one of Louise's favourite days of the BLR calendar, because it was the start of the proper stuff instead of the months of planning that went into it. So if anyone is interested, more the merrier. It's on the 22nd of October. Message me and I'll point you in the right direction, or go and find the Big Learner Relay Facebook page, the official one, and the details are on there.
I'll put links to that in the show notes as well. But yeah, I second what you said, Chris, as well. Just the feedback was lovely. Yeah, it was just very weird one to record. And I think the other thing I'll just chip in here actually is it's one of the things I've got good at as a podcaster is segues. And I have no idea how to segue from this, so I'm just going to do a hard cut. So we're going to move on to the news because, as we said, we missed quite a bit, and obviously over the last couple of months. And one thing that I missed in particular, and I don't know if this was actually August or July or possibly earlier, but I came across this on social media that Marmalade, the insurance company for learners, that Marmalade, not the preserve, they have stopped and cut all their commissions for driving instructors, basically. Because I know at one point they had commissions for buying cars and all sorts, and then it reduced and certain things got knocked off, and now they're not doing anything. And that might not seem like a big story, but they were the biggest providers for that in the industry. Other insurance companies do it as well. As far as I'm aware, for example, there may be others I don't know, but Collingwood is still doing theirs, to the best of my knowledge. But Marmalade, that was something almost they seemed to pride themselves on. And then this just kind of came out of the blue. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that, Chris.
Cards on table. I've done a lot of work with Marmalade over the years. It wasn't anything I'd heard about either, and until someone questioned it, and we looked into it, and yes, that's the case. They have said they're looking at other options and other things going forwards. So maybe it's a sidestep rather than it just being the plug pulled. Maybe it's a reflection on how difficult things are at the moment. We've all seen the price of insurance has shot up. I don't know. Maybe, if I'm being generous, maybe we view it that they're trying to keep our pupils' insurance policies down by not cutting us in on it. So it's more client centered that way, isn't it?
It is, but there's potentially truth there as well. And this, I'm not throwing accusations at anyone, but it's like it's easy as a customer sometimes forget that other people's prices go up as well. Even you go to a local sandwich shop or whatever, if they put their price up, it's not always because they're after more money. Their prices have gone up. You think of us as instructors, fuel's going up, our insurance is going up. You've got all these cost increases, so we put our prices up accordingly. And if they had that choice, for example, of increasing insurance or just cutting our commissions, I could understand why they did that. Obviously, we don't know that's the case, but I think it's good not to jump to conclusions. But it is a bit of a kick for instructors, because I know that's something I'd used in the past and earned a few quid from. So it's a little bit of a downer for instructors, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Especially when it's one of those things that you it's a partnership. Even if you never speak to them, you are giving your reputation to them. I think we always feel a little bit hard done by, if nothing else. But hopefully, they'll hopefully be at the Expo. We can have a chat and find out some more news and let people know if there are any changes.
Yeah, it'd be good to see them at the Expo. Maybe I'll grab a few minutes for a recording and we can get something from them. Speaking of the Expo, there's a good segue. Speaking of the Expo, that's coming up soon. This is the last green room before the Expo, which is it the 8th? It's the 8th of
Yes.
October, isn't it?
So
Yeah. We usually have a little chat about it before it, and we're usually quite full of praise and stuff. So anything different this year, or do you think it's, and I don't mean that in a negative when I say, do you think it's the same? Do you think it's just a continuation of the good work they've done?
it seems to be different names that are speaking, so it's nice that there's some differences there. It's going to be a couple of big differences. I think one is, as we mentioned, Lou Walsh, and the other one, if anyone knew Sue Duncan's partner Jeff, who was the epitome of a gentleman, just absolutely to the waistcoat and just how he spoke. And you say the word gentleman, he comes to mind. And sadly, he died shortly before Louise, and it was going to be difficult anyway. That's magnified now. So yeah, I think I always remember with the Expo walking in and seeing him. That's going to be another odd one. And I think there'll be some reflection and memories going on there, but the stands will be much the same. I don't ever expect there to be anything groundbreaking and new. Free ice cream again, we hope. Or is it vegan? Their ice cream?
No idea.
No. That's just all the more for me. If it's not, it's fine. And hopefully 20 free pens. But outside of that, I think there's at least 3 decent speakers going on, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. DVSA are in attendance, so we'll see.
I must admit, I've been to a few of these now. So I think the 2 of the Expo and the conference, and one of my highlights is always seeing you with your goodie bag. I've never seen anyone look as happy to have a bag full of pens and stuff. It's an amazing moment. I'm a big fan of the Expo, as anyone that listens knows. I think it's, it is free for us to go down and take part in, and it's a great event. There's some great speakers there. It's great to get the different exhibitors. I think what I'm finding the more I go is I'm enjoying the networking side of it more. And by that, I don't mean going and sort of almost doing business to business transaction. I mean, just the meeting of new people. I think I'm really enjoying that. And, that's not necessarily who I am, but I'm enjoying the friendliness and the camaraderie that's down there. So on the flip side, I realize I'm saying that, but I'm also going to ask people to come and watch me on stage. So I'm telling people to do the thing that I'm not going to do much of. But what I did do this year, actually, I've created my list. So I'm not going to go and see all these people because I'm going to be doing the networking, I said, but I've created an itinerary of who I would go see. So 9 a.m.
Who you would see. Sorry,
Yes.
that sounded like you'd made a list of people you're definitely not going to talk to, and I was chomping at the bit then.
No, I have that list, but I'm not going to read it out. I'll do that in the green room extra. I mean, look, I appreciate that in the same way as when I did my top 10 instructor resources for Josh's YouTube/podcast channel. I offended a lot of people by not mentioning them. I appreciate I'll be offending people by not mentioning them on here, but I'm going to say it anyway. So 9 a.m. I would be going to see Racy Griff. I love her. 9:45 would be Kevin Tracy Field. 10:30 would be Bob Morton. I think that also is up against Lee Jout and Mick Knowles, who I would be keen to see, but I've always got a soft spot for Bob. The one I couldn't decide on genuinely was my 11:15 because the Stuart Lockery is on, and I love Stuart, and also Abigail Britton. Well, she's advertised as Abigail Britton. I think her name is actually Holland now. I think she's married and changed her surname. But as we know with the Instructor instructor, they're not amazing with names. Are they Christ Bensted? But Abigail is at the DVSA. For those who don't know, she's at the DVSA. She's in charge, head of recovery, and she's in charge of the Are You Ready campaign. And I'll be keen to see what she does there. I'm feeling self-aware now. Anyway, 12 o'clock, I'd then be going to see Amy Hartley. 12:45 would be Phil Cowlett and Diana Todd. 1:30 would be grudgingly going to say this now, Chris Bensted. 2:15. I kind of stuck to this one because I would have to go see it, which is me. And then 3 o'clock, there's no other choice, apparently, no other choice other than Loveday Rider. Which brings me, segue, to the next question I was going to ask, which there was a brilliant question on Facebook not so long ago by Gareth Marchant. Now, I'm a big fan of Gareth Marchant. I think I love some of the questions he posts online. He's been on the Green Room once, a couple of years ago. Go check his episode out. But he was asking a question around, should the DVSA headline? Is that giving out the wrong message if the DVSA headline? And it's something I'd never considered before. Now, I'm going to kind of put my two pennies worth in around the marketing side before I throw over to you, because I can understand why they do it in terms of a marketing sense, because that sounds like a big name. The chair or CEO, whatever role is, of the DVSA Love Day Rider, that sounds like big compared to Price Bensted. You know, compare those two. Which one has, no offense, Chris, but which one has more pulling power in that sense? I can understand from a marketing standpoint, but from a standpoint of the industry, should the DVSA be headlining?
I'm just feeling bad that the most professional bit, and you had it all pre-planned, and I trod all over it. So I'm sorry. I think, should they in the current industry? Yes, because I think they're what we've got. Who would lead if we had a different room and we were going to put it together? It would all be opinion based. It would be people answering questions about what they think we should do, and the power is at the DVSA. But I agree with Gareth that it's that they are the minimum standard setters. They shouldn't be about the awesome industry in which we can do whatever standards we want to. We can include anything that we think is going to work and benefit people, and then it's down to the customer to judge whether they want it or not. And I think in that world where we're looking upwards and outwards, no, they shouldn't, because they're setting the minimum standards, and why would we worry unless there was an issue with those? It's, who would you rather go and see? Some inspirational speaker that can make you think that you can do anything, or would you rather go and listen to the tax man? Because that's kind of the comparison. Do you want to go and just hear what those steps are? And probably not, unless we're scared of something. That's when we turn up, isn't it? Standards check change. Oh no, everyone turns up. It's when I was chairing, I think I technically still am, our local association. COVID got in the way heavily. The way to fill the room was to get the DVSA along every single time. And it shouldn't be like that. There's some amazing people came along with things that would benefit your business and make you more money. I don't think the DVSA are ever going to do that. So depends what we're in it for, really.
I think, and I'm using hypothetical numbers here, but let's say that 800 people regularly went. Let's use that number, 800 people attended. Mm-hmm. Do you think if the DVSA weren't going to this one, that number would drop significantly? I'm not on about tiny fluctuations.
Again, we haven't got anything else. The Expo is the only one of its kind. Previously there was Mike did the instructor show, and there was another one that was a kind of free event, go along and hear people speak. We're down to the Expo, which is the ADI NJC and Intelligent Instructor. There are DIA have got a conference. MSA have conferences, but they're a little bit different. The format's a bit different. I think the word conference sometimes puts people off. I've always thoroughly enjoyed them when I've been. But the Expo is a different beast, a different way of working, which I think allows you to kind of, mooch around and have a look, and you don't have to feel structured inside of it, which probably appeals to a lot of the industry. But you can do it your way, and as you showed with your list, you can choose different to other people. Not everyone's going to want to turn up to see Terry Cook, and Christ Bensted is in trouble, because I'm searching for the bloke when I get there.
I mean, I must just chip in there, actually, because I realised as we were talking that wasn't the Intelligent Instructor that got your name. That was the DIA that did that, wasn't it?
Oh, is it? Everyone's got it
It's
wrong this year. It's still wrong. You're still safe on the Intelligent Instructors website. It is still spelt wrong,
all right, fair enough.
so
But
it's okay.
I find this topic fascinating. I really do. And I mean, just on that list for a second, again, I know this will be different for everyone, but how awesome is that? You could go at 9 o'clock and go and watch all of those things. And there's quite a variety just in that list I've said. Now, for anyone listening that's unaware, every time slot I put on there are three people speaking. And I've chosen one from each one, the list that I would go to. And that's no offense to anyone else, by the way. So anyone that is unaware, there's actually triple what I've just described. But how cool is it that I could go and see that list and take part of that? I think that's awesome. But this whole thing about how should headline it brings back. I'm not dwell on this too much because we spoke about it before, but the standards check headline in podcast episodes or in when it comes to training, we use the standards check. It's not always because it's about the standards check. More people will listen. One of my highest downloaded episodes is when I spoke to the DVSA. Now, I think that's slightly different because it's the first time I've done it and it was about a specific subject. It was an interview, so maybe a slightly different thing. But I I would love it if whether it's the April one or the October one next year, if they put the DVS in the middle and pick someone like a Bob Morton. I think Bob would fill that end slot quite nicely. He's widely regarded as an industry legend. Whether you agree or not, irrelevant, but he is regarded as that.
He used to be, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And maybe he can regain
Sorry,
that
Bob.
crown by being headlining the Expo. But I would be fascinated to see that. But I don't think anyone is going to the Expo for one person. I think they're going because of the collection that's there, the collective, if you like, Chris, to coin a phrase, the collective of people that are there. I think that's what they're going for, and then checking who they want to see. I don't think that number will drop if he was 800 figure. I don't think that number's going to drop massively if the DVSA weren't there.
No, I think if people are going to go, they're going to go. I also, as you pointed out, if there's three people on at the same time and the DVSA are on their own, then arguably you get three times as many people in the room with the DVSA by default. I wonder how much keep them there till the end is to keep people there until the end. So they'll hold out until a bit like end of credits, during a film. You sit there just to find out there's nothing worth watching. It was you held out for no reason. I would like it more if there was more challenging going on, and I think so often we as instructors let ourselves down if we do it collectively, that someone will get caught up on their local traffic light sequence or something at their local test center instead of asking the big questions, and really going, what is it about road safety? You're only going to get political answers anyway. So yeah, I'm less bothered because I'm less influenced by what they say nowadays. Because I've heard it before. It is when changes come along, and at the moment, if there's a question that's not about waiting lists, I'm going to be impressed.
Going back to what you said, because just thinking about it, it's interesting. You were talking about like, would people hang about if they had a DVSA for the middle of the day? And then you mentioned previously about it's the choice of listening to the tax person or the inspirational speaker. I mean, oddly, I've got the tax person on my list, but
no offense to tax people, sorry.
Yes. But do you think we need something, or maybe I'm phrasing this badly? Imagine if we had something that excited us. Do you know what I mean? Imagine if that end thing, that 3 o'clock slot, was exciting. Because again, no offense intended to Love Day or the DVSA, but that's not exciting. No one's going to the Expo. Oh, I can't wait to listen to Love Day. I'm gonna go away buzzing. People are either just curious to see what she says, or they want to throw a question about waiting lists, like you said. Imagine if they'd got I don't know, like you said, a motivational speaker, what's his name? Daniel Priestley. I know he's not a motivational speaker, but someone like that, or a Dan Meredith, been on my podcast. These sort of people, nothing to do with the industry, but someone that could come in and deliver something impassioned about something to be excited by. Or even if you switched it around slightly. Now, I'm not going to use me as an example, but imagine if you had someone interviewing Loveday Rider at a specific thing that isn't where she's not just going to go, oh, I'm going to waffle a bit and then just go on to the next question, where someone actually says, actually, you're wrong there, and let me tell you why. That would be different. And this isn't a criticism of Intelligent Instructor at all. It's just me, my brain wandering now. But imagine if you had that thing to end with, something that was genuinely exciting. That would be the thing that made the numbers go up. Would you agree?
Yes, I just don't know what that would be with wide-reaching interest. It's probably a reflection of the eclectic mix of driving instructors that, there are no two the same, which is, strange, because often we'll have different opinions, but we're often of a similar type of person, or there's similar traits there, but it is so wide ranging, and I just wonder whether, what would that be? If we stick a wrestler up there, you're like a proper big name, you're going to be front of house trying to get an autograph. I'm probably not going to turn up. I wonder what that. I don't know who I would need it to be to kind of feel that I wanted to go and engage. It's interesting. Maybe there's a poll in that. Let's get some recommendations.
It's definitely a poll. For any of you guys watching now, feel free to chuck some suggestions in the comments for who should headline as this inspirational, motivational person. But what I am going to say is that because Loveday is not in the same room as me, technically I'm headlining that room because I'm the last person on. So, I'll go with that. And it is myself and Sophie Thompson, and we're going to be talking all things mindfulness theory training, as well as mindfulness for ADIs and self-care. And I'm making that quite a broad topic because I haven't decided yet. She keeps asking me what I'm going to talk about, and I haven't decided, so I can't tell her. But something around those topics should be fun. So make sure you're coming along to that.
Because she works so well when she's not prepared.
People like preparation. Unfortunately, I'm not great for that. So we have got some suggestions. I would love to see Chris. I'm presuming that's you. I'd love to see Chris interview Loveday. I've got a shout for James May. James May could be quite good. There was always the last 5 minutes where they get some sort of promotion or big announcement. Not sure how this would work with us, though. Yeah, I quite like the idea of James May. Either way, yeah, keep those coming in if you've got any other ideas. But there was another idea put forward, Chris. It was an idea that someone suggested to me on my social media that was then pointed out that you suggested me a while ago. But unfortunately, I must have either been in a really grumpy mood or a really happy mood, one or the other. It was put forward that we could do an alternative and just start recording the green room randomly.
There's an idea.
Still, yeah. When you put that to me, I genuinely at the time thought like that would be too militant. It would be like, let's show them. And I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know whether it would just be a bit dickish. And I can't decide whether I'll tell you what, let's go and do this green room and show them. And then 3 people turn up and we look like a bunch of imbeciles. Although last time we did exactly that thing, except we did it just me and you in the car. So
yes, it's our ball. We're taking it with us.
Yeah. So no one could not turn up and watch us because we didn't give them the choice. But I just wonder, just to use that example, what do you reckon? Should we do a green room? Should you just jump on stage when me and Sophie have finished, grab a mic and start recording with me?
Yeah, let's broadcast the secret plans that's going out before the expo, and then give the game away. Yes, no, we should. It's basically a sit-in. I think whichever room it is, we take it over and just carry on regardless, and see who the genuine supporters and fans of as I said that, Phil Cowley pops up on the screen saying I'll be there.
Yeah.
It was a given, Phil. It really we wouldn't have it any other way. So yeah, I why not? I'm not bothered about what they've got to say. We're not going to miss anything. You would think that they've all got all of our email addresses, so they'll keep us informed if there's something important to know.
I mean, Richard Borges and Richard Storrs are currently arguing over who's going to have the privilege of throwing us out. So, all right, well, we're over 30 minutes into the show, so we may as well introduce ourselves. We'll come back in a second with 20-mile-an-hour zones, amongst other things. But Chris, do you want to just take a moment to tell everyone who you are, where they can find you, and what you do that's so special and unique?
Yes. I'm Chris Bensted. I am the co-founder of the Driving Instructor and Trainers Collective, the DITC, which is the signposting platform for the driving instructor industry. If you're looking for something, get in touch, because we probably know where it is, unless it's something to do with socks that have, your washing machine swallowed one of them. Can't help with that. But anything else instructor related, get in touch. We can probably help. Getting particularly good at people who've got points on their license at the moment. So be careful. Don't touch your phone when driving, because those phone calls are really depressing. Because it's unlucky. It's very rarely blatant rule breaking. It's just someone's done something stupid in a moment. I also do theory training on Zoom, one-to-one, supporting pupils, particularly those with specific needs. So if you've got any questions about that, get in touch.
Excellent. And as you may well be aware, I am Terry Cook. I'm the host of the Instructor Podcast and the Instructor Podcast Premium. So if you are after a quick fix and some cheap and easy options that give you the magic wand to help you grow your driving business and become a better instructor, do not come to me, because I will not provide you with that. I will instead provide you with some resources that you can work through and put time and effort in to become a better instructor and run a better business. And you can find more about that at www.theinstructorpodcast.com. But you are currently listening to the Green Room, and we're going to move on to another couple of bits, because I want to touch briefly on something else that's happening in October. Because on the 8th we've got the what we're just talking about, the Expo, Intelligent Instructor and ADI and JC. I always forget the ADI and JC bit. And then on the 18th we've got the ICE event, which is in Birmingham, and it is the UK's only road and community safety VR event. And we're going out with Chris.
We are. I'm fascinated. Having just had VR enter our household with my my now teenager. He hit 13 because he wasn't allowed one before he was 13. It's fascinating stuff, and it really messes with your head. I think it's got massive potential. I spoke to a couple of companies from countries beginning with S. I can't remember which ones they were. I think one of them was Sweden, and I think the other one might have been Switzerland. I can't think of other countries beginning with S, but anyway, during lockdown, which is why it's all a bit hazy, because all blurred into one. But they were doing fascinating stuff, but they're all starting with driving on the right-hand side, and looking at options of actually teaching people to drive. So you can be sat there in your PJs or nothing, and pop in and appear next to your pupil who can, is sat at their house with your VR headsets, and you're teaching each other virtually in that environment. Or they can be doing some practice of judging roundabouts and things. There's some really good options. Also looking at the dangers, the things that we can't really do. So dealing with blue lights, the things that don't come up, overtaking other vehicles, because when we're the one doing the speed limit and everyone else is going at, pushing it a bit, we don't end up getting those overtaking opportunities. So the concept fascinates me. How they're getting a conference out of it, that fascinates me even more. I think it's going to be really interesting as to what's there and the benefits to us. But if not, we can have a good chat.
And I have spoken to James Evans, who's, I don't know if he's the organizer or one of the organizers, and he's given me permission to take a microphone and do a bit of recording down there as well. So that'll be put out via podcast as well. So there'll be something there. We have got a very important question in the chat that I think it's worth bringing up. So I like to bring up the serious points as they come up. And it's from Kev, who says this is his first live green room, but he's watched many and he has one question. Is this a Terry and Chris beard off? No, is the answer, because I've had mine cut, I've had mine trimmed.
It is trimmed. What are you talking about?
Yours never changes. Genuinely, whenever I see it, it's always the same, and I can't decide if you've mastered the art of controlling your beard or you just get it cut regularly.
I get it cut fairly regularly by a barber that refuses to take it any shorter than this because he's jealous. Because I went in originally saying I'll just have a number 2 all over it. That's it, all sorted. And then stops that, and it's grown to this. And his is the same as it was when he was doing the first lot. So he's very upset. So yeah.
Well, as always, this is a show where we tackle all the important issues. So let's move on to another one, because back in August, when we first met with the idea of we're planning dates for August Green Room, you couldn't make it, Chris, because you were on holiday. And you text me and said, good you couldn't make it because you wanted to talk about the Meginar. Because way back in August, which I think was the 4th, we had the first ever Instructor Meginar. So let's just take a moment to reflect on that, because it was really good. I enjoyed it. I created it, so I'm biased, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I've been back and watched it since. Some lovely speakers on, delivering some lovely content. What were your thoughts on that? For anyone that wasn't aware, that didn't watch it, that's listening now and has no idea what I'm banging on about, the Instructor Meginar was an event where I got 9 incredible speakers to come and deliver 20-minute, well, supposed 20-minute presentations. Should have lasted 3 hours, went on for 3.5 because a few people overran and I kept talking to them in between. But yeah, and it was exactly what it said in the tin, a Meginar. So what were your thoughts on the Meginar, Chris?
Firstly, I think you and I both are ridiculously critical of everything we do ourselves. So actually, if you think it was good, it must have been awesome. And I would agree. I think everybody delivered something that was, engaging and interesting. There was a really good mix of stuff. Nothing overlapped. But they all oddly kind of fitted together as well. It wasn't that, I don't want to give you too much credit because, why break a habit? But I thought you did really, really well. So well done, you.
Thank you. And anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, you can go and check the highlights, which is an hour-long video. The hour-long is highlights. That's on the YouTube channel, the Instructor Podcast YouTube channel. You can see that video there. I thought the speakers were really good. I'm not giving myself credit for that, by the way. I'm giving the speakers credit for delivering awesome presentations. And one of the things that I did like that I've helped cultivate a little bit over the past year or so is with my premium members. They have got very, very good at giving me constructive feedback. They're not just, oh, this was awesome, this was awesome. They will tell me what they like, they'll tell me what they didn't like. And I got some really, really good constructive feedback. I don't think there was actually any negative feedback. It was constructive and positive, and that's exactly what I wanted. And there was some teething problems, some stuff I'm going to learn from and take from. But I have announced the next one, which is January the 17th. I think I haven't wrote it down. Slight change. It's going to be at 5 o'clock rather than 6 o'clock kickoff to give, so it's not running quite as late because it ran to 9:30 last time. But more details will be available for that. So ideally, sign up to Instructor Podcast newsletter and you'll get announcements and details of how to join up and stuff over there. But it will be the same again. It will be in its private Facebook group where you join that Facebook group and it'll be broadcast there on, fingers crossed, the 17th at 5 p.m. Off the top of your head, Chris, is there anybody you'd like to see? Apart from Love Day Ride, obviously she'll be your top choice.
Was exactly the name on my lips. That was what I was going to say. I was going to say Love Day Rider. So I'm going to have to think now. Who would I like to see? We'll go James May. We'll punch high. Quentin Wilson. He's always good as well. No, I'd like to hear actually the name you mentioned earlier, Daniel Priestley. I think his take on driving instructing as businesses. Anyone who hasn't come across him, the KPI, key person of influence, and is he oversubscribed as well? I think, but he's got a few books out there, and if you get a chance, some of his training's free. Go to it. He's bang on it, absolutely brilliant. And I'll also go with the one you said earlier of Dan Meredith. I think something about business would be a really nice way to go through things, and maybe slot a comedian in the middle who can just take the mickey out of driving instructors for a bit to make us remember that actually we're not God. That'd be cool.
I quite like that idea, but I was imagining the email. Fancy coming on to do a Meginar for instructors where for 20 minutes to take the piss out of us. I think that would work. That's probably the best email I've ever sent to anyone.
Old oh help, Rob Beckett was defending learner drivers the other day on Twitter, saying that anyone who gets up the backside of a learner driver should be shot. I don't think he quite worded it like that, but yes. So we can have a chat with Rob.
Speaking of people that get up the backsides of the car in front, Wales have introduced a 20-mile-an-hour zone. They have introduced a 20 mile. That's a good segue, wasn't it? They've introduced a 20-mile-an-hour zone. It is not a blanket 20-mile-an-hour zone. It is a 20-mile-an-hour zone for residential areas where traffic meets pedestrians. I think that's how it's been described. And also, and I did not know this until I did a little bit of digging, councils have been given permission to change speed limits back. So it's only mandatory where there's schools. So if in 6 months' time the council is looking at certain roads and they're finding that it's not working in those areas, they can change the speed limits back. Now, I have not been looking forward to talking about this, but I feel it's right that we do. So, Chris, what are your thoughts on this not a blanket 20-mile-an-hour speed limit enforcement in Wales?
Really upset that I can't see Phil's face, because this is normally the moment where we lock eyes and we have a different opinion or something. I firstly think it also only applies when there's a Y in the day of the month and all these other rules. It's so bloody confusing. It looks really simple on the face of it, and then it's not. It seems like a real. I don't quite follow, to be honest. But I'm not in Wales, and I'm not planning on going there for a while, so I haven't massively tried to understand it. But I just feel it's confusing. I'm not in much of a different area because I'm on the outskirts of London. So if I go the other side of the M25 and head in a bit, it's all pretty much 20s anyway. Do I think it's helped road safety? No, not in the slightest. And the worst thing that's happened is confusion. So we've got a local town that put in 20 zones during COVID, and then took them out again afterwards, but only took out half the signs. So that causes danger because confusion causes collisions. I think that if people are being try and highlight danger rather than force them to do something without reason, because if people are kind of forced into it and just told this is what you should do, they'll have a differing opinion and they'll do the opposite. Lesson for the DVSA there as well. So I think actually it's probably going to do the opposite of trying to make things safer, and the people that it is aimed at, unless they're heavily enforcing, and last I heard, there weren't any extra police out there to enforce, unless they're spending a fortune on road traffic cameras of sorts where people will slow down for that camera and then speed up again. And I'm not a big fan, but I've never been a fan of enforcement over education anyway.
I actually thought that we were further apart on this than how you described it. I think we're actually quite close together. I think the thing for me is this. It seems to have split a lot of the population, where you've got a big chunk, and I'm talking extreme, so you've got a big chunk that are like road safety, and this is the only way to do it, and this is what's going to save lives. And if you don't agree with this and you clearly just want to run children over, and then you've got the other side, which is like, no, you cannot reduce the speed limit. You are taking away my civil liberties. How dare you impose a speed limit on me, despite the fact I've been following them for my entire driving life. And I think more, you've got the two extremes, and they're the people we hear. And I think
Mhm.
most people sit somewhere in the middle, but as with anything, it's he who shouts loudest is heard. And I I actually the people are going to shout at me now. I actually quite like the principle of it. I agree with you in the side of education over enforcement. I do believe that, but I'm also one for thinking be, there are things that I can think of that I would rather have done than a 20-mile-an-hour zone. You know, better education, more police on the roads just to enforce the current measures, better signage. We currently have two. There's a road local to me that currently has a 50 sign and a 60 sign next to each other, literally next to each other. So there's all kinds of stuff we could change. Mandatory driving tests every 10 years, or that won't out the backlog, but you get my point. That I would have prioritized over this, but I don't think that makes this a bad thing in principle. I think that the thing you touched on there massively is implementation. I think that's the thing. It's not been implemented very well. It's confusion. However, if you follow the speed signs that are there, you're not going to have a problem unless you get a 50 and a 60 next to each other, which obviously isn't ideal.
But if we have the situation where we currently have with 30s, everywhere else, where there aren't signs because street lights mean 30, and we have that situation, we had a road locally where they went from 40 to 30, so they took all the signs away. So rather than having signs along there saying what the speed was, there was nothing because street lights mean 30. But it only works if you know, and if you understand that principle. And so many people don't. And from the people that I speak to that are doing speed awareness courses, not driving instructors, but it's the thing that they learn. The thing that, I didn't know that, streetlights meant 30. So it's getting that across. As I say, for me, it's education. I've always liked the idea of having a traffic light system on roads where the second there's a crash, it gets marked as a red road and it slows right down, dramatically take the speed limit down because there's been a crash. If there isn't a crash for a certain amount of time, then all right, ease off. And I work on the assumption that no one leaves home deliberately trying to crash. So, work that way. But I don't know. I just don't feel it's going to get. It's a lovely statistical outcome for whoever decided to put it in place to go. Well, it's had this benefit, but those statistics will be fiddled to represent whatever they want them to represent, like all statistics do.
Yeah, well, I can't disagree with you. I think that it comes down to the implementation. I mean, you were saying about the signs. I would imagine, and I could be wrong completely, but I would imagine the area you're talking about, there is a 30 sign to go onto the road. So you're turning into a 30 sign. Well, I would also imagine that in Wales, and again, this is a problem, I'm imagining it hasn't been communicated very well. And I
Yeah.
actually did research this to see if I could find out a definitive answer, and I'll come back to that in a second. But I would imagine that it's just taken now that streetlights is 20 in Wales, unless it says otherwise. And the there was there was a Labour MP or a Labour council, I can't remember, that I went and listened to a podcast on, and he was quite open and honest, saying this is a bedding in period. There are still cities in Wales that haven't changed the speed signs. This is what's annoyed me. This is, and it was banging on about how they've been discussing it for 4 years and planning it and researching it, right? So you've had 4 years to prepare these cities. One of the cities, by the way, was used in the trial. So the city that isn't prepared for the change was used in the trial. And I've forgotten the name of it and I haven't wrote it down. It was somewhat beginning with F. And I'm like, how does that work? How could they do a trial in it without changing the signs for the trial, and then make it go live for this without changing the sign. Now, just to come back slightly as well, if I'm thinking more locally to areas I know, I would be really, really chuffed. I can think of loads of roads I would love them to reduce the speed on, whether that's 40 to 30 or 30 to 20. Genuinely. But not as in the national speed limit, not as in restricted roads are reduced to whatever, but as in this road's a danger, let's reduce the speed. And I don't mean this road's a danger because there's been a crash, because that's too late. We need to be more proactive rather than reactive. And we're not. No one is. We're shit at that. Not just the government, not just the DVSA, but instructors and humans. We wait for the thing to go wrong and then, fix it going forward. We should be preemptive. And I've spoke about this before, but since moving to where I am now, I use this stretch of 20 road every day. And it's a long, nice long. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes to drive down it. And I do 20 on it. And I just bob my cruise control on, all along doing 20, no problem. And I would say I get overtaken 3 or 4 times a week. I'm tailgated every day. The car in front's pulling away. And but then there's a flip side. And this kind of touched on a comment that's been made by Guy McMillan, who says, hopefully those who did 40 and a 30 will now do 30 and a 20. I just wonder if that had been a 30, how many people would be going above 30? I just wondered, do they keep the speed at 25 because of the 20? Do you know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of stuff to consider there. In principle, I'm not against more 20 zones, I think is where I would fall back on as a default.
I agree if it was selective in that way that they went, right, that road there. They don't. And we've seen that inside of the London area. It's blankets. It's the whole of, basically. And when I'm doing theory training, I always say this because, if people are in the area, for the theory test, it's, streetlights mean 30, but in London, streetlights mean 20. It's much more likely that that's the case. It'll be signposted otherwise. And, that's the way that Wales are going as well. I did respect to Wales. They've managed to get the whole country talking about it, which is better than DVSA did when they changed the highway code rules. And most people still don't know that the H1 rule and the associated rules have changed. But yeah, there was a project that I was involved in. If you haven't looked at it, check out drivinghub.co.uk. Which was with what was Highways England is now National Highways, and it was working with a black box insurance company. And there was the conversation, almost a promise, of being able to use black box data to find the roads that haven't had the crash yet. Because as you said, we work on a retrospective approach of crash first, fix later. But actually, if you have black boxes going, well, everyone's driving that junction too fast because the black box is picking up on the forces acting on the car. Maybe then we could put something in to slow people down a bit earlier, or slow them down at all. I think in the modern technological world, there should be options to do that. I don't think there's an appetite with insurance companies to share data, but if they did, that would be a nice approach. So, as something that is we're not just going to sit here and say 20 is not good, but that what we want is it done in a sensible and intelligent way rather than, it's all bad. And what would happen? Do we need speed limits? That's my big question, but I shouldn't have said that. I should have saved that one for later.
I'm going to answer that, but we may not spend the 2 hours on it there. It probably needs. Should we need speed limits and do we need speed limits are two different questions. Should we need them? No, because just because you're in a 30 zone doesn't mean you should be doing 30. Unfortunately, do we need them? I probably think yes, because people are stupid and don't pay attention. And I think that that's part of the reason. Well, I genuinely bought some new bleach today and it says do not drink on it because we need to tell some people this. So I think that I'm not going to go any further down that road because Excuse the pun, not going to further down that road. But what I will say is, before we came on air today, I was speaking to you about I'm becoming a grumpy old man. And I'm trying really, really hard not to. And I'm catching myself in so many areas. You know, all the fuss about Sam Smith because he dressed a bit provocatively at concert. I'm like, let it. David Bowie were dressing worse like that. Elvis dressed worse than that. You know, and it's like I'm not gonna shout at a cloud about that, but road safety is the one that I struggle with. And as much as I completely agree with everything you've said, I can't argue with it. I think that when there's a lot of people complaining about it just because they want to go faster. And I think that if you look at the core reason, not on about any of the conspiratorial reasons, but you look at the core reason of it being for road safety and not wanting to kill people because you are 5 times more likely to die being hit at 30 than 20, I think is a statistic. And something I didn't know that I found out recently was that your body is designed to handle 20 mile an hour impacts because some people can get up to that sort of speed. So your body's kind of designed to manage that. But once you go over that, you're not designed to combat that anymore. And I found that quite interesting. But anyway, slightly off topic. But I don't have patience for people that just moan about it. I think if they brought this in, yes, we can be specifically critical, as you have been, and as I have been during this, and I have no issues with that at all. It's when it just becomes a, oh yeah, but I want to do 30 and I just want to go fast. And oh, the Alliance of British Motorists, wah, 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 fuck off. And it just really, really annoys me when people are like that. But take a moment. So let's see if any of my lovely premium members want to come in and share their thoughts. So here we go. We've got some amazing humans that want to share some thoughts. I'm guessing, Chris, I don't know about you, but I'm guessing that there's going to be some 20 mile an hour points raised here. So Kev, you came in first. So do you want to what do you want to bring into this conversation, Kev?
The only thing I wanted to bring in was about headlining at the Expo, and I genuinely would love to see Chris interview Loveday. Yeah,
I'm going.
I'd love to see it. Absolutely love. I mean, to be honest, I would have loved to see Chris and Lou interview Loveday. That would have been awesome. But knowing how much you love them, Chris, I would really dearly love to see that. So if you can put it to the organisers that there are people out there that would love to see it. Yeah.
There was a lovely moment at the DIA when I slightly overstepped and she put me in my place. And anyone that was there will tell you the whole room froze. I still stand by my point that getting rid of the B+E test was stupid. And had nothing to do with road safety, which was the comment that I couldn't keep quiet at the time. But we have made up since, and you know, we have spoken. Yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting, definitely.
And if there is, because I'm planning on going, and if there is any other questions that aren't related to waiting times, I'll give a round of applause at the back of the room.
I mean, I feel like I should chip in here and say I'm only slightly offended that, you know, there is someone here that specialises in interviewing people and does it every week, and yet you're choosing Chris over me. You know, whatever. But Chris,
he who shouts the loudest. That's all I can say.
That's a very valid point. Chris, what would you ask Loveday if you had her on stage? I'm putting you on the spot again, but is there anything that springs to mind, a challenging question that you would specifically ask her?
Oh, that is on the spot, isn't it?
Can I tell you mine while you're thinking?
Yes.
Okay. Be something along the lines of, without blaming driving instructors or the general public, why is everything so shit?
Yes, you've worded that better than I would have. Yes. I to be honest, I agree that Terry should be doing it. Because he's far better at interviewing than I am. But it'd be fun, you know. I think, yeah, it would. rather than the question, it would be the holding to account that would be the thing that I think is most important and doesn't happen. Very, very rarely does someone come back and say, actually, that's not true. But just as an opportunity, because I don't think it gets said enough, when the people like Carly Brookfield from DIA, Peter Harvey from MSA, the committee member, because there's a few of them, they kind of share the load from the NJC. When they are in the meetings with DVSA, they do hold them to account like that, and they do stamp their feet. And yeah, it does happen. So I'll just take the moment to actually acknowledge the fact that they do jump up and down on occasion. It doesn't mean it gets listened to, but yeah, it'd be a good one. I think it's got to be about waiting lists, isn't it? It's got to be. My question would be, why didn't they change it to 18 instead of 17 for the driving test? Because that I'm going to keep hanging on to that for as long as I can. But yeah, I'd like them to justify their actions.
It's worth mentioning as well, because you have given some credit to the associations there, and rightly so, but a little bit of credit to actually the DVSA, in particular Loveday Ryder, because she doesn't need to come. She doesn't need to come and answer those questions or give a talk. She could just hide away, and so full credit to her for turning up. I think that it is worth mentioning that she does that, because I have to be honest, I think if I was in her shoes, I wouldn't. So, fair play to her. Okay, Tony, what can we do here for? What's on your mind?
An awful lot.
Just settle down for a minute.
No. I just want to catch up with you. You mentioned the Meginar. I thought it was absolutely mega. I could learn so much, and I got so many resources from that. So I'm looking forward to the next one. This is not enforceable. We've not got police on the roads, and we've not. They cannot concentrate on such an important issue like this. So whoever's come up with this idea is a great idea in theory, but actually, how are they going? It's the dickheads that you want to be stopping going stupid speeds, and this isn't going to do that. And I really feel it's a great idea, but I can just see all the operational police officers with their heads in their hands thinking, what next? But it's true, isn't it?
That's a really good point, actually. It's something we didn't mention. The fact that if people just decide not to adhere to it, then what's going to happen? Listening to a specific podcast today in preparation for this, the feedback they were saying from some of the trial areas, and a couple of the cities really embraced it, and the feedback was really, really positive, but a few was really, really negative. Oddly enough, the city was one of the ones that didn't have the signs put up. Oddly enough, was one of the ones that didn't embrace it. They just ignored it a lot of the time. So I think that's a really good point, in that how is it going to be enforced? Because it's all right now where we get that bit of speeding from people. But if everyone's speeding, how can that possibly be enforced? So I think that's a really good point. What do you think, Chris?
It's that balance, isn't it, between putting rules in place and then actually being able to do something about them? Because then you allow people to break all of them. Actually do. So you actually do the opposite of what you're trying to achieve by not being able to back up. I tell you what it's like. It's like with kids. If you do that again, you're going straight to bed, and then they do it again and you don't back that up, or I'm going to take your phone away, or I'm not going to take the handcuffs off, whatever it might be, then it's that. You've got to see it through. And if they put in these rules and they don't back it up, then there's going to be an issue. If they put in these rules and then they do everybody for going 21 in a 20, equally there's going to be an issue. I think it's a real challenge.
Anything to add, Tony?
A solution. You could have some cardboard cutouts of police officers standing there with a pretend gun, something like that. I don't know. No. Nothing more to add. Thanks, Terry.
I'd love some real police officers there, not cardboard
Oh.
ones. I mean, I get your point, but as you said, and I think I touched on it before, I think there are things that I would have done before this, definitely. I'm not saying I wouldn't have done this eventually, but more, and again, going back to what you said, Tony, the officers in place to actually enforce it, the signage in place to enforce it. You know, if they've been researching it for and I can't get my head around this. They've been researching it for 4 years. It isn't a trial city, and that trial city still hasn't got all the relevant. Anyway, not try not to repeat myself too much. We're joined also by a fellow podcaster in Nick Smith. How are we doing, Nick?
I'm not too bad, Terry. Thank you. And you?
Oh, better have seen your smiley face. Obviously, what have you got to share with us today?
This 20-mile-an-hour speed limit thing, I thought we were supposed to be in the United Kingdom. We've now got the situation where the theory test is wrong for 2 different countries in the United Kingdom. Because in Wales, of course, if you pass your theory test in Ross on Wye, but you work just over the border in Wales, how do you answer the question? Does traffic
Change the question.
Okay, and so does it now specify only in England?
It says in England, Scotland, or Northern Ireland. Yes.
So
which is ridiculous.
So there's no longer a theory question about Wales.
No.
Because they didn't do that for Scotland when the national speed limit for trucks was changed and Scotland didn't do it. But we've got national speed limit in Scotland for one type of road is different to the rest of the country. We've now got street lights mean something different in Wales than they do in the rest of the country. There is no borders. There's no way to check that the person that's driving in Swansea is even aware that there's a speed limit change. And I know they say ignorance is no defence, but here ignorance is actually a defence.
When the rain starts, it becomes 20s, and where the rain stops, it's 30s. That's how Wales works in my experience. So that's fine.
So you've gone to a French stadium.
I agree with the theory stuff. I think that the fact they've changed it and it's going to Wales, whatever. I disagree with the ignorance defence thing. I don't think it is. I think that it should have. I go back to what I said before. It needed to have been implemented better. There needed to be more awareness. Dan Hill said it on a podcast once about why can't there be an app or something like that? Because everyone's got a phone. So it's mandatory that if you are a license holder, you have to complete this online course every year or every time there's a significant change. And if you haven't completed it within 6 months, you get your license revoked. You know, I appreciate that's quite a big dramatic change, but so is changing the national speed limit. So I on one hand, they are wrong to not implement it properly. On the other, if people, as a couple of comments have alluded to today, if people aren't asked to read the highway code, that's on them. If people aren't bothered to keep up to date with stuff, that's on them. And I used to be one of those people. You know, before I became an instructor and actually started paying attention to the fact that, oh, if I keep driving like this, I could kill someone. I used to be one of those people. And guess what? If something had happened, that would have been on me, 100%. Not on the, you know, if I'd have still been driving now when I'm not giving way to someone on a junction and they're stepping out, that's on me because I wouldn't have taken that on board. If I go to Wales and I haven't decided to brush up on any rule changes before I go there, that's on me. Now, all right, not everyone's as forward thinking as that, i.e. the do not drink sign on bleach. I just think that sometimes we have to be careful to not make excuses for people. And I'm guilty of that as much as anyone, whilst also being critical of the poor implementation. I think there's a really delicate balance to be had there.
But there is, even with relation to speed, more important things to work on. Drivers of large vans. When was the last time you saw a large van doing 60 on a motorway rather than 70, 80, 90? I know there's generally good drivers in every type of vehicle, generally bad drivers in every type of vehicle. But, and yes, that was said specifically for my standards check examiners. But they should be focusing on that, or focusing on the bloody electric scooters that are plaguing everywhere, the unregistered motorcycles that are all over the place as well. While you were talking, I downloaded some accident statistics from the government website. When you look at single carriageway roads, the numbers aren't huge, and I know how many deaths is acceptable, but in terms of safety, it's not going to change a whole lot, and it's just going to confuse a whole lot of people.
I respectfully disagree. I think that one of the ways you can change culture is by enforcing it. Now, the problem we've got, going back to what Tony said, is that we can't enforce it because there's no bugger to enforce it, because we haven't got anyone to enforce it. But that's, in my opinion, that's what they're trying to do. And if that's what it takes, and look, here's the thing, right? I don't think going down to 20 is going to cause problems necessarily, apart from that it causes people to moan. But it may save some lives. Now the data will come out, you know, and as Chris said, and as you've almost, I don't mean this as an insult, and I think it may come across this way, Nick, and I promise it's not that meant this way, but almost as you've just proved, we can find any statistics to support our argument. You know, give me 10 minutes to go find someone that shows opposite to that I can, I'm not saying you've done this, but I could massage to suit my argument. So whilst I'm not saying I disagree with you necessarily, I just think I don't really see the massive problem. But again, maybe I'm looking at it from the perspective of I'm looking at all the people that are really kicking off, not like you that's coming at it from an intellectual standpoint. I'm on about like the Alliance of British Drivers or whatever it is that are saying it's the worst thing that's ever happened and they're stealing their freedoms and stuff. So maybe I'm being a bit biased towards thinking of those people. But yeah, I just think that the concept isn't atrocious. The implementation is.
Enough. If different people, different opinions.
I don't think
wonderful world.
I don't think we're that far apart. As I said to Chris at the start, I don't think we're disagreeing. I think we've just got a slightly different view on what we're actually talking about. Anything you want to touch on with that, Chris?
No, I was just reminded of the thing we haven't mentioned, which is you, Les, because potentially if my car was 6 months older, it'd cost me £12.50 to go to my house every day. And I think that's a similar thing, is this blanket approach to try and get a result. If I turn right coming out the driveway, I'm in the middle of fields and, you know, farming area, and apparently it's London. So, you know, I think whenever you have a blanket solution to something, you're always going to get the opinions. You're always going to get people that are either end of that bell curve as well. And actually, let it settle, and there'll probably be some kind of happy medium.
I'm not going to comment on you, Les, because I have an opinion, but I don't know enough for it to be voiced, if you like. All right, Phil, let's move over to your good self. What do you want to bring into this conversation?
I first want to bring up that Chris mentioned that he handcuffs his kids, and we just brushed over that.
I've just come to expect stuff like that now.
I never said they were my kids.
Oh,
True.
God.
Yeah, handcuffing other people's kids is fine.
Matt, ready?
Particularly if they're annoying. Yeah, I sort of kind of just concur a little bit. I do agree with Chris on this one. So there's a shock. Actually, no, to be fair, we agree on most things. I think it's just a bit lazy. Is the way doing the whole blanket approach of the whole. It should, and the problem with it being lazy is it means people are less likely to respect the speed limit, because there will be roads that are 20 that you're driving along going, there is no way in hell this should be a 20. And I'm in Exeter at the moment, and there are roads in Exeter that shouldn't be a 20 because they went overhaul on 20 signs. There are certainly roads that definitely should have been a 20 that got moved to a 20. But I think it was just a case of that blanket approach, just it means you lose respect for the speed limit, and then people, but not us because we're driving instructors, but we will be the only ones on the road driving at the speed limit. I was talking to one of the head guys at Vision Zero Southwest, which are they're a road safety campaign. Their Vision Zero is 0 deaths, and they were saying that and he's an ex-police officer, and he doesn't like the idea of going down the enforcement route because they don't like it. It doesn't work, and they much prefer want education, and pushing up education. They much prefer things like the speed awareness courses and things like that because it educates and puts drivers back on the road, hopefully driving safer. And things like, if you want to reduce people's speed, make the road feel like it should be slower. So changing things like the road furniture, changing the width of the pavements and stuff like that, it makes it feel like a slower road and I get that that's more expensive than chucking up a few signposts, or just saying that the speed limit's changed. But that's the way I would go. But again, it's a money thing, and if they were going to do it with just speed limits, then I think they could have been more specific about which roads to have more respect on it.
So I want to touch on two things there. Firstly, I love that point about the lazy aspect of it. As soon as you said that, like that just resonated somewhat chronic, because that is what it feels like. I hadn't put that word to it, but that's what it feels like. It's just, let's just do it everywhere. Screw it. We won't pinpoint this. And I think they have pinpointed a little bit, because I say it's not every single road that's changed, but it just feels like, let's just do most of them. And I think that's a really, really good way of looking at it. And I think that's probably where they're wrong, in that the almost a lack of due care and attention. Because as you said, if we've all been down the roads that don't feel like they should be the speed they are, but you kind of put up with it because a bit further down it'll change or whatever. But if every road's like that, eventually people are going to start giving up. On the other just thing I wanted to touch on, and I do think we have to be a little bit careful with this, and maybe I'm in the wrong for thinking this, I don't know, is think I touched on it before, that there is a list of stuff we could do before it. And I think everything you've said there is correct. All this stuff should have done before. And then if it's still not working, right, screw you all, we're going to 20 because you're not paying attention. But I think they have. You know what I mean? I think there's an element of they've done it. What are we doing with it now? And I think that would be an interesting place to move the conversation a little bit. Not necessarily now, because we've been talking for a long, long time. But I think that I'd be interested maybe to have that conversation next month or at the Expo on the 8th. We'll love this talking. We'll bring that conversation in then. All right, so it's 20. What are we doing about it? Because let's be honest, there's every chance that could happen here as well. We can't rule it out. So yeah, I was actually, you caught me with that one, Phil, in particular, the laziness comment. Chris, do you want to disagree with Phil?
Not today. No, I think he's right. I think the big thing is going to be how are they going to enforce, and if they don't enforce it, what's the outcome of that going to be? Because everyone's going to be running wild otherwise. Although I thought electric cars should be allowed to go 30 and all of the other cars should be allowed to go 20 and see how that worked. I thought that was an alternative.
It's I think people do what they can get away with, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And if they, it's why we see, why don't you stop at the end of the street? Because nothing ever comes. And it's the same with these signs. If you start doing 25, 30 in these 20 zones, then why would they ever change it if they don't get pulled up for it? Do you want to come back on anything there, Phil?
No, I'm just happy that me and Chris are back to being on the same page.
I'm not. I was hoping for a bit of headbutt in there. Interesting point by Nick in the chat. If they went to 20 in England, I would have to reduce my teaching area drastically or lose a lesson a day. I'm curious, is that talking about going sort of between lessons? So going from one lesson to the next, not having time to get there?
Yeah, it's purely travel time. It's purely travel time, particularly around the rush hours and moving around the rush hours. You can write off the dual carriageways as a chance to get across, so you've got to go through town roads. And if they took 10 miles an hour off me, the half an hour I've got, I lose 5 miles.
Interesting point. I don't know how I would respond to that at the minute, because my initial thought is tough, but that's really unfair, so I'm not going to say that. But go on, Chris, sorry.
From an instructing point of view, there's a real risk that people then don't get experience, and we see this in the people that are teaching in London and can't get out to, decent speed limit roads, where people don't have the experience. I'm on the outskirts of London, so we get people coming who've only ever driven in London, coming to the local test centre because they can get a test occasionally, and you take them on national speed limit road and they're absolutely bricking it. They're too narrow, they're not used to it, they can't cope with roads without parked cars, which I always find interesting, or roads without road signs, because they're used to being told everything, so they drive in a particular way. I wonder if going back to the stats actually for a second, if the national speed limit, country roads are the ones where more people die, is doing this inside of a reasonably wide area, reducing people's experience level, going to increase those crashes that are happening? And will they deem those to be connected to the 20s if that were to happen? Because what they'll probably say is we need to make more roads 20, because those roads, it's going to be a disproportionate gap, because of that, an increase in gap because of that. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch. I'm glad I'm not in Wales.
Chris has just made a point there that's made me think specifically about my area as well. And that is that already I only do 90-minute lessons. And that's because in an hour lesson, I can't get from my main customer areas to a national speed limit dual carriageway and back again and have time to teach it. Because there is no national speed limit dual carriageway in Sheffield at all. So I have to go out to the Bromfield bypass. If they cut the speed limit by another 10 miles an hour, then I'm either going to go to 2-hour lessons or say, sod it, you're not doing 70, it's on the motorway. And then I'm taking somebody that's never done 70 and dump them straight into a motorway. Which is usually smart motorway and down to 63 quality anyway.
I think that ties in what you said there, Nick, and Chris, to almost a little bit of what Phil was alluding to about the things we could do instead. And it's talking about overhauling the system. If you look at a driving test and what you experience on a driving test, or you look at specific areas and what you experience in specific areas, some people have lessons and will never get on national speed limit roads. Others will never go on motorways. Others will never go in rural areas. Some people will never get in busy town centres, whatever it is. So, I think that's, again, maybe a slightly different conversation for a different day, but that's where you overhaul the testing system. That's where you have to take certain courses, if you like, in certain areas before you get your license allows you to do that. That's going back to the whole graduated license thing. Also, massively regretting that I didn't ask this question on my 6 for 60, because I think this would have caused a bit of debate. I'm going to put this in the next one, Chris, just to warn you. All right, Guy, what do you want to bring in?
Yeah, hi, Terry. I think listening to all this stuff tonight, you were talking before about becoming a grumpy old man, and yeah, that's happening to me, I'm afraid. I think I'm getting quite depressed, really, watching with everything that's going on, because the more that seems to happen, it just seems to be, until we actually start to police some of the laws, you might as well scrap them anyway. We've heard before about the electric scooters. E-bikes, they're supposed to only do 14 miles an hour. We got overtaken by one doing 30 the other night. We couldn't keep up with them even close to it. If they're not going to actually police any of these rules, there's no point in having them. So what's the point? And as with the theory test, unless they start putting some sort of, even if it's just an online thing that you have to do every 5 years in order to keep the license, no one's going to actually bother to read these things. Because I did quite a lot of studies in social sciences with the OU a few years back. And unfortunately, a person can be very smart, but people in general are very stupid, and they will just go for the lowest possible thing. That's all they will ever do. So until we actually incentivize them or enforce it, what's the point?
I'm going to do something to you that I haven't done to the other guys. What do you suggest then? as instructors, because one of the, and I'm going to put a caveat on that actually for the context. You guys know from listening to this podcast that, and I've tried to avoid doing this today, that I don't just want complaining and moaning. That's never been my thing. I want answers. I want solutions. I want suggestions. So as driving instructors, because we can't make the government change their mind unless someone's going to run for prime minister or start their own party, in which case you've got my backing, by the way. What do you suggest we do?
All we can affect is the next generation of drivers. We can't do anything about the people that are already on the road, and unfortunately, it's the people that are already on the road that are the problem.
See, there, when we were talking before about inspirational speakers, you almost made that sound like a negative. To me, that's inspiring. We can impact the next generation of drivers. As soon as you said that, I'm like, yeah, we can. Yeah, and to me, that's what we should be doing. That's this whole conversation. We've been talking like 90 minutes now. That's what I'm going to take away. That comment. Sorry, Chris, for our conversation before, but that sentence, we can impact. Now there will be some people that listen to that and they won't hear what I heard. They will hear, oh yeah, but we can't affect the other drivers. They won't hear the positive of, but we can affect these people. And I actually
Absolutely
disagree.
right. We can keep our people to be. They're going to be. Hopefully, they're going to be more. They're going to be safer than the guys that are already on there if we're doing our job properly. Well, this is why at the beginning, when I get a new learner, one of the first things I say to them is, if you assume that every other road user, and by road user, I'm not just talking about car and van drivers, whether it's cyclists, pedestrians, cats, dogs, squirrels, the lot are all complete and utter morons are out to get you and drive accordingly, you're not going to go too far wrong. So they're already expecting. That's all we can do. We can just put them in the best place to deal with the idiots that are already out there. And I hope that's not coming over as negative, but I think we've got to try and keep these people safe.
I take it as positive, although I would disagree slightly when you say we can't influence the drivers on the road. Now, I think we can. I don't think we do it enough as instructors. It's something you probably heard me speak about before, about the front we can put on, and it might not influence everyone. But here's the thing: if you influence one other driver every year, you're potentially saving a life. You're potentially reducing that KSI statistic. And that could be because of the influence that you have on one of your students who goes home and talks to the parents, and the dad thinks, oh, actually, I never thought of it that way. Maybe I'll do it this. It could be that you share some road safety stuff online and one person sees it and thinks, oh, that happened to me once. Yeah, I need to change this. It could be you create use my example, create a podcast that people go and listen to. The 5 Minute Theory podcast, for example, gets a lot of listeners that aren't learning to drive. They use it to brush up on the theory skills so they don't forget this stuff. So I think you're actually underselling yourself. I think you're giving this really positive comment to begin with, but then undersold potentially the influence you actually have on the current drivers. The problem is we just don't see it because what we see is a negative. We don't. Think of your learners. They don't notice every car behind them at the lights. They notice the one car that one time that beeped at them. So I like that point. Chris, anything you want to touch back on there?
I think the social factor is something that we don't recognise enough. There was a World Bank report, I think it was 2015, but don't hold me to it, in which they did a study of things that were going on around the world that was about social change. And in a country in Africa, they put stickers on the buses where there was a high level of fatalities on the road. People who get hit by a car, they'd leave them to die at the side of the road. It was pretty nasty. And they just said, if you see bad driving, shout at them. Now, we see that a lot. It's not bad driving. It's normally someone shouting at the car with the L on the roof saying, learn to drive, which I always find a really, strange thing to shout. They are well done for being able to read. But if we did that the other way, maybe we should shout more and criticize the negatives. Maybe there's more to that, as not us as instructors, but us as a society. If we can make something not acceptable, then there's proven ability to have change there. So I think the best thing we could do as instructors is what you've just said, which is have that positive angle. And not just go bloody cyclists. When was the last time you played spot how many good cyclists you can see in an hour? because they're all out there. There's some brilliant cyclists. We've got the Velo girls locally. They are such an awesome group. It's a pleasure to get stuck behind them, because you know, that sounds really wrong. I'm going to start that one again. But but no, you know, they're not going to do something stupid. They're not, because they really take it seriously, and they, you know, they look after themselves. So yeah, I think if we could spot the positives, then, you know, it's definitely something worth thinking about.
I think it's good to shout about the positives as well. I think that's the other thing, because I mean, from my example, I've had it a few times recently. I had a motorbike coming behind me, so I edged over to the left a little bit, and he went round and just gave me that little wave that they give you where they put the hand out. And then I had one where I, you know, slowed down for awesome rider, and they give you a little thank you, and it makes you feel good. And you go, I'm going to do that again because they gave me a thank you. You know, how many learners do we do that try and get the smiley face on the lights because they like the smiley face? You know, so I think that, yeah, we'll shout the negative stuff, shout about the good stuff. It's all there. But anyway, we've covered all the news, so shall we get stuck into the main topic of the show now? No. Does anyone want to say anything else? Give me a little wave if you've got anything else you want to bring in, and I'll bring you on. Go for it.
What Chris was just saying sparked off a remembrance in me. I do driver CPC courses as well for truck drivers. We're talking about different types of road users, and we've got the usual thing about BMW and Audi drivers and Mercedes right at the back bottom. And I think what we also need to be doing is almost educating people about the psychology of other road users. Because when you look at the behaviours that these typically German cars exhibit during the working day, they're all signs of stress. So we need to take more account of what might be affecting them that we don't know. What you were saying about your bike riders never always being quite good, Chris.
Yes.
By the same token, we also need to look at the factors that might cause less than optimal driving and account for them ourselves. Because a lot of these people that are out on the roads are very stressed by the boss breathing down their neck and targets that they can't meet. And they've got all the same worries we have about feeding the kids and keeping the roof over the head and this, that, and the other. Is it any wonder that driving standards are bad when they've got these psychological stresses on them?
But we're not trained in that as instructors, and we should be. There's
Speak to Diane.
No, I was going to say Lisa Dawn's course at Crampfield was awesome for just giving an insight into that driver behaviour, into what I just assume, and I teach that everybody needs a wee. That's my blanket approach of just assume that they need a wee, because we've all been there, and you know that they're doing it for a reason. Or I've said before about Fiona Taylor's point that really struck home with me, despite other people having said it, which is the first response is an emotional one. Don't judge them by it. Judge them by the second one. So yeah, I agree. I don't think we do enough of that, but I don't think we're taught enough of that. I've been lucky enough to do other bits around kind of psychology and things like that, and I don't feel like I know anything. But you know, there's bits that I can kind of draw on. Let's look at, go back to looking at Norway, where you do a degree qualification of 2 or 3 years to do this job, and then they have 2 different types of instructor, one of which is doing exactly that, driver psychology, rather than the practical stuff. We can't even get our heads around the fact that being a theory trainer is a real thing, and I am still an ADI. I've had 3 phone calls this week from intensive companies trying to flog me courses, and I've said I'm not on the road, I only specialize in theory, and they go, oh, you're not an ADI anymore. Yes, I am. I've got a badge. If we can't cope with that change, we're never going to cope with the fact we ought to teach psychology.
Points, both. I think I agree with both of those. I think the other thing I just want to finish on is, when we're speaking about this show, we have a very loose idea of what we're going to do with the show. Quite often I'll text Chris at the start of the month to arrange his date, and I'll say, I've got this idea. I had no idea this month. Suggested to Chris. Chris' idea was how we engage with the industry, which is what we're going to talk about. Obviously, a lot of news, but I think how we engage with industry, this is it. I think you guys are doing it now, coming on board. We've got people listening to these shows. We've got people engaging with these shows. They're watching these shows, not just mine, obviously, but I think this is a really good place to start with that. So it's probably a good starting point for next time as well. So, yeah, big thank you to you guys for joining us today. It's been great to have you along and get your input. Thank you to you, Chris, for joining me for the green room as always. And yeah, I think I was right at the start of the show. It's me. I'm the problem. It's me.